Morning guys, I'm down in the snowy mountains again today. It's my last day here and I've only got probably a few hours out on the river, not a full day. I'm going to go and do a little bit of trout spey today. I'm fishing with the Sage Trout Spey HD 2-weight 10'9" trout spey rod. Now a 2-weight trout spey is not like a 2-weight single-handed rod. I suppose you could say it's maybe roughly the equivalent of a 5-weight single-hander, so it's not as light and silly as it sounds. The river's very high today. We've had pretty significant rain in the last few days, over 100 millimeters. So everywhere is dirty and high. So to be honest, I don't have very high hopes for the fishing today. I think if we catch a fish, it'll be a bonus. The river's a little bit clearer than it was last time I was here a couple of days ago, but even so, it's still very, very high and it's pumping. So more than anything, I'm just out to do a little bit of practice and hopefully tell you guys a little bit about trout spey fishing and how it applies in Australia. So I've just been participating in Peter Morse's trout spey weekends down here, and that was absolutely fantastic. Peter taught me a huge amount about it, and also you know, his assistants Dave Murdoch and Lyle Crawford both shared a lot of info with us. So it's been a really, really good weekend. If this is something that you're interested in giving a try and getting involved in, I think it's a really good idea to come along and do a weekend like this, like Peter Morse's weekend, because there's a lot to this fishing. It's not necessarily totally straightforward, and yeah, it really it'll give you a good start if you start with some instruction so that you're off on the right track. Now today, in terms of flies, I'm fishing a 2-fly rig. I'm hedging my bets a little bit. I've got a big black woolly bugger with a gold bead on the point, and on a little dropper further up, I've got a little nymph. They've both got bead heads on them, and I'm fishing a sink tip as well, a 50-50 sink tip with 5 foot of T8 on it. That's just to try to get the whole rig down a little bit in the water column, and hopefully that's going to get us to the right depth, to where we need to be. But in trout spey, you're always wanting to adjust these things. There's always an element of adjusting your rig to get the right depth, the right sink rate that you want to. Anyway, so we may adjust that out on the river. We'll just see how we go. But I suspect today is going to be more about just casting and practicing and applying some of the techniques that I learned over the weekend. So I hope you guys enjoy this. The water's definitely cleared up a little bit. Couldn't see any of this bottom last time I walked through it a couple of days ago. So it's still very high, but at least it's a bit clearer. So there's a nice riffle here that runs into a deep little trench along this bit. You can see there's a little bit of a bubble line there. There's some deeper water. There's also a nice edge up there where the main current joins this side of the current. There's a little bit of an island in the middle there, and just there's a nice edge there where it splits along the side of that. So we're going to start from upstream and we'll swing downstream through this water. So trout spey fishing is a downstream fishing method. We start upstream of the water that we want to fish. We swing down and across through it and gradually work our way down. So that's a little bit of a difference for people who are used to traditional upstream nymphing or dry fly fishing. So I'm going to start short first of all. I'm not going to go and immediately try to cast right across the river. a little bit more line to each cast until I get down to the zone where I want to be fishing. There are a whole bunch of different spay casts that you can use in this style of fishing. This one that I'm using at the moment is called a single spay. I've got an upstream wind. Single spay is an upstream wind cast. And there's a few different types of casts that you can learn. The single spay is what's called a touch and go cast, where you anchor just briefly touches down before you make the cast. Okay, I just got bottom there. That's good. The other style of upstream wind cast uses a waterborne anchor, and that's what's called a snap cast, which goes like this. Places the anchor on the water, backswing and then cast. They both have their uses, both essential casts to learn. Okay, you'll notice each cast I'm just fishing a little bit longer, covering different water. And when I get out to the length of line that I want to fish, I'll start stepping down in the river. Now, mending is a hugely important part of this fishing. What you're doing when you're mending is you're not only straightening the line and getting connection to the fly, but you're determining how the fly is going to swing, how fast it's going to swing across the current, and what orientation your flies are going to have in the water. Whether they're coming across broadside fast or whether they're swinging across slowly with a downstream orientation. There are situations where you might want to do either of those. It really depends on the situation, on the speed of the water, the flies that you're fishing, and the presentation that you want to make. And also how deep you want your flies to get. All right, I'll do one more cast from here, and then I'm going to start stepping down. Ooh, hello. I think I just had a little grab then. So I might make that cast again. Just going to pull up a tiny bit of line and cast that again. Unlikely that the fish will have a second go, but you never know. That's bottom. Okay. Well, that's telling me that my flies are getting down. which is good. Give it more sink time this time. With a big high mend. Just try to get those flies a little bit deeper. I can just mend it in towards shore there to try to get the fly to swing across a little bit further. This bit at the end of the cast is what's called the dangle, and a lot of strikes will come at the bottom there. So you don't have to be in a big rush to pull your flies out and cast again. Sometimes if a fish sees the fly on the swing, it'll follow it across and it'll strike once it reaches the dangle. So when it gets there, just give the flies a little bit of action so the nymph looks like it's emerging, or the little streamer looks like it's pulsing or swimming around. Now I'm not touching bottom down there, which indicates that I can afford to get my flies deeper. So there's a few things that you can do to do that. That was a bad cast, I'm going to make that one again. There's a few things you can do. You can cast more 90 degrees, do a big upstream mend, and then follow it down with the rod tip, give it a lot of sink time and walk it down your next step down the river. So you notice that I'm stepping down after I make the cast here. That's to give the flies a little bit more sink time. If you're fishing shallow water, the top of the water column, and you didn't necessarily want to do that, then you might step down before you make the cast. But in this situation, I want to potentially get the flies deeper, so I'm going to step down after the cast during the swing. Big upstream mend. Step it down, sinking. Now I'm in contact and it's swinging and I'm fishing. And I'm going to try and swing it all the way across into the inside into that soft bit. I might even step back across a little bit in closer to shore here. So I'm getting my fly right into that slot that I want to fish, that soft water down there. Big high mend to straighten out the fly and the leader and everything. Just keeping in contact as it's going down. And now it's swinging. And mix it up a little bit. Sometimes give it a little bit of action on the swing, a little bit of pulsing like that. Other times I'll just let it drift across. So when I'm pulsing it like that, I'm more actively fishing the streamer as opposed to the nymph. The dead drift is a better presentation for the nymph, but you will still get fish on the streamer on a dead drift too. think I just felt a tiny little bump then, which might have been one of the flies touching bottom. That's good. It's a sign that I'm getting the flies deep enough. All right. I'll step it down. Just going to go one step at a time here because this is a nice stretch of water that I want to fish pretty well. If I was fishing water that wasn't quite as promising, I might go through it a little bit faster. Okay. Try a more 90-degree cast this time. A little bit more sink time. One step down. So see how I'm reaching out with my rod there at the beginning of the swing? That's to slow the swing down so that I get a nice slow drift across. If I'm fishing a nymph, I don't want it to be oh! I had a grab. Bugger! If I'm fishing a nymph, I don't want it to be sort of flying across the river really fast. I want to fish it nice and slow. That was a definite grab then. I felt a quite distinct dunk dunk. It wasn't bottom. All right, I'm going to back up one step and try that swing again. It came right at the end of the swing on the dangle, that bump. All right, now this time I might try more of a downstream cast with a big upstream reach mend. Try to get a slower swing and get that fly a little deeper. Huge upstream reach mend. Follow it right down into the swing, and now it's swinging and I'm fishing it. A more downstream cast like that is going to slow down the swing. A more 90-degree cast straight across the river will give you a faster swing, which you can slow down to a certain extent with mending. But a lot of these little things affect the presentation of how the fly appears in the water to the fish. How it drifts, the depth that you achieve has a bearing on all of those things. So as Peter and Dave were saying in the Trout Spey weekend, Trout Spey fishing is still very new to Australia, and there's a lot that we're still working out about what you can do with it. Like most styles of fishing, there's a lot of different ways you can skin a cat, so to speak. There's lots of different presentation styles that you can use, lots of different flies that you can fish. And yeah, so there's still a lot of... Oh, there's a tug. Just had a couple of tiny little bumps at the end of that swing again. Might just be a small fish. But they were definite bumps. Oh, and I'm on bottom. So yeah, there's lots of experimenting still to be done with this style of fishing in Australia. Trout Spey is well established overseas, particularly in the US, but their conditions are different, their rivers are different. Trout are trout to a certain extent, and they will respond to similar techniques, but it's a matter of adjusting the techniques to our river conditions and finding what works. So it's exciting, it's an emerging style of fishing in Australia, and there's still lots to be found out, lots of experimenting to do, which is pretty interesting to me. Alright, I'm starting to get bottom down there, it's shallowing up. I don't want to wade too much further here because it starts getting deeper into that deep slot. So I'm going to start pulling a little bit more line off now and casting a little longer. There is quite a bit of trout spey fishing going on in New Zealand as well. New Zealand has a lot of rivers that are well suited to it. In Australia, we've got a handful of rivers that are big enough to suit this style of fishing. It's a style of fishing that suits bigger rivers, particularly our bigger tailwaters. So there's a handful of them on the mainland of Australia that are suitable. It's not something that you would really use on a smaller river or a small stream, but it's something different. If you're looking for something different that you haven't tried in fly fishing before, I really think this is a lot of fun. It's a great fun way to fish, and it allows you to cover different water and cover different fish that you wouldn't easily be able to fish with a single-handed rig using traditional fly fishing techniques. And of course there are a lot of other applications for two-handed rods in fly fishing in Australia as well. One of the other things that I really like about it is the casting. The casting is a lot of fun. It's a quite relaxed style of casting, and it allows you to throw some fairly long casts that you could do with a single-hander, but they take a lot more effort, a lot more false casting, a lot more double hauling, all of that sort of thing. With a spey rod, it's just a simple matter of set up and go. You've got a much longer lever to do the work for you. So it takes a little bit of time to learn the casting. There is a bit to it. But if you enjoy that kind of thing, if you enjoy learning fly casting, then I think you'll really enjoy two-handed casting. As you can see, you can fire out quite a lot of line there without too much effort at all. It's not about power with two-handed casting, it's all about technique. If the rod is long enough to do all the work for you, you've just got to put the things together to shape the loop nicely and let the weight of the line and the rod do the work for you. So I'm casting a longer and longer line at the moment. It's always nice and satisfying casting a long cast, of course, but it's not something, if in a fishing situation, it's not something that you necessarily always want to do, because what you end up doing is spending more and more time stripping in line and less time actually fishing the fly. So as a default, the best way to go is to only cast as much line as you need to cast and fish with your feet. Vary your position on the river But in a situation like this, where there's a deep slot ahead of me that I don't want to wade down into, but I do want to cover the water that's a little bit further downstream, then that's the situation when making a long cast is useful. In case you were wondering about the capabilities of the 2-weight Sage Trout Spey, this is obviously a sink tip that I'm casting with 2 weighted flies and a skagit head, and with this 2-weight I'm able to make a cast of probably 75 or 80 feet. So if you're wondering about the capabilities of the 2-weight and whether it was going to be enough rod to do what you want to do, I think the answer is resoundingly yes in 90% of situations for trout. I've cast reasonably sized articulated streamers on this, on the skagit head, and it manages it. It does it just fine. I think probably you would draw the line at really big weighted sculpins or massive articulated streamers with big cone heads on them. But short of that, this rod has got enough balls to cast most trout rigs that you would want to cast. And of course the advantage of having a really light rod like the 2-weight is it's very light in the hand. It's not tiring to cast. It's very easy to cast. It's a lot of fun when you catch a fish on it because you're not pulling them in on a big heavy rod that's not suited to the weight or the size of the fish that you're catching. And it's also a light enough rod to be very versatile. So I'd have no hesitation with a Scandi head on this line throwing an upstream dry fly if I wanted to, nymphing with it. You can indicate a nymph with it. You could even Euro nymph with this rod, it's that light. And it's not too long to make it unwieldy for that purpose. So yeah, I must say I'm very, very happy with the Sage 2-weight Trout Spey HD. It's a fabulous rod. Now that I've had more of an opportunity to fish it some more and cast the skagit on it, I'm really impressed with the capability of this rod. It's a lot more capable than I expected it was going to be. So just to show you, I'm probably casting beyond the head there. I'm probably casting 45 feet maybe of running line. That's not bad for a 10'9" 2-weight. All right, I think I've pretty much covered this spot, guys. We might move and see if we can find another spot to swing. So there's a deep sort of edge along here with a little bit of an eddy off the main current. In high flow like this, it's quite possible that the fish might have pushed up onto the edges. So I might get up there and see if I can have a little bit of a swing through some of this. Just going to have to be a little bit careful with my D-loop behind me as well, because as you can see there's a tree behind me there. Dig upstream mand and give it sink time. That's all sink time until I come tight there. I'm just trying to fish this edge slot here. I'm not interested in getting out and trying to fish the main current out there. I'm just sort of working on the assumption that the fish are going to be up in the edges. So even though I'm casting out there a little bit, it's just to cast out there, let it sink down, and then swing across into the edges, into those edge seams. bit of action through there. Okay, yeah, I'm hitting bottom there. Okay, gotta be a little bit careful here with my anchor placement. I'll walk this one down. Hold my rod out there so I don't snag up. Just watching where my line's drifting to. Down there. Right. Okay. Swinging. I'm just mending there to try to slow down the swing a little bit. Oh, it's drifting right in towards the bank there. I'm just conscious that I don't want to get snagged up. Some eddies down there that are sort of putting bends in my line to doing strange things with the swing, so I'm just mending a little bit to try to keep the line straight. That's a single spay. Big upstream mend. Give it sink time. I might even go a bigger mend next time. Try to get it even deeper. Because I think it's a fairly deep slot through here. Judging by the gradient of the drop off here. Okay, big upstream mend. I'll feed some line into the drift. Now before we snag up on the bank. Whoa! I blew my anchor then and ended up in the bushes. Okay, might have to walk down and get that one. So blowing your anchor happens when you put too much power into your D-loop setup. Which is what I did then. So you can see this is a situation where a single-handed cast might be a bit difficult because of the tree behind me, the big bank. Not impossible, but one of the great advantages of spay casting is you can make these casts without a lot of room behind you in situations where it would be quite difficult with a single-handed setup, or at least with a conventional cast. You can spay cast with a single-handed setup, of course. I was hoping there might be a nice big brownie or something tucked in along that edge. I'm snagged up now. He's off. Good. That's the danger with this, of course. So I think this is another example of, I'm definitely fishing an area that you would not normally target in conventional fly fishing, but it's suitable to spay. It opens up different water. That's the point that I'm getting at. Alright, might make 1 or 2 more casts here and then I'll move up and find some other water, because if I push this too far I'm going to get snagged up on this shore with the way that line is drifting. One more cast. Okay, so we'll move along and find another spot. I hope you can see how spay casting with the long rod helped me to work around this obstruction here, this tree on the back cast. With a single-handed rod or conventional fly casting, you'd struggle to fish that well, but I was able to cover that water pretty efficiently and cover a lot more of it with the two-handed rod than I think I would have with a single-hander. Alright, there's another spot I'm going to try here. It's not a classic trout spay spot, but because the main river out there is pumping so hard, as you can see, there's a little bit of a backwater in here with just a bit of gentler flow. So whilst I won't really be swinging through this because of all this still water in front of me, I might just strip the flies through this quickly just to see if there's any trout sitting in this calmer water out of the main current. I've only got a relatively small spot here, but it's enough to spay cast with, so we'll give it a go. So as always, I'm going to start short here. I'm not going to walk up and just make the longest cast that I can make straight away. I want to fish the water at my feet first. Just to see if there's anything hanging around in this little backwater. Just giving those flies a little bit of action with the rod tip while it's in this close, because I don't want to strip in. Just wanted to show you guys as well, you can certainly overhead cast these rods, particularly the lighter ones like this 2-weight. You can single hand overhead cast them in situations where you want to, and if that's what's called for. They're certainly very versatile tools, these two-handed rods. A lot more versatile and a lot more usable in a lot of situations than you might think. Okay, start fishing out in that flow now. I'm not stripping in yet because you might see there's a little bit of black there on my fly line just around the tip of the rod. That's the end, that marks the end of the head, and that's the point that you always want to make a spay cast from. So I don't want to pull in any more line than that while I'm casting. I'm just going to use the rod to give it a little bit of action at this point, and then as I strip a little bit more line off, at that point I'll start to strip in until I get to that point. It's just a basic roll cast, as you see. The roll cast is the basis of all spay casts. So a spay cast is a roll cast with a change of direction. So you can see here I'm not stripping in line each time. I'm just covering the water a little bit further out with each cast, but then I'm fanning around with the same length of line, fishing that, and then I'll pull off a little bit more line when I'm ready. That cast there is called a snake roll. I'm not really going to go into casting too much today. That's a whole other subject on its own, and something that's best taught by a qualified instructor, because it's a complex topic. Oh, it's just snagged up there. But again, you'll notice what I'm doing here is I'm actually casting upstream. So whilst the majority of spay fishing is downstream, there's no rule that says you can't cast upstream. You can. Just depends on what this fishing situation calls for. Alright, let's start throwing a little bit longer now. There's all kinds of conflicting currents going on here. So that's why I'm stripping in. I'm not really letting the fly swing too much here, because the current's doing all kinds of weird stuff. I'm a little bit restricted with where I can place my anchor here, because I've got blackberries and reeds on that side, another bush over there. So some of my casting here might be a little bit unconventional, because I'm working around the obstacles that are presented to me. So I'm just stripping in to maintain contact with the fly through that stuff. A little bit challenging with those blackberries there, right on my right hand side, just in there. Just got to be careful that I don't put my D loop into that. You can roll cast a tremendous distance with these setups. So I'm fishing a bit of water here that probably doesn't get fished very much, because it would be difficult to reach with conventional fly casting. Alright, the wind's just starting to come over my left shoulder, so I'm going to start casting on this side now, on my right hand side. Always want to place your anchor on your downwind side in spay casting, so that you don't get any new ear piercings. So you can see there, guys, I'm probably roll casting 60 feet or more with a sink tip and 2 flies. That's a pretty handy thing to be able to do out on the river. When I say roll casting, it's almost a roll cast, because I can't do too much of a D-loop here because I'm standing on the bank, but it's effectively more of a switch cast. which is a roll cast with a dynamic D-loop. Okay, we've got another spot here with a bit of a soft edge along there. There's a back eddy coming back through here, which is going to make it a little bit difficult. I'm going to see if I can reach out with the rod over that back eddy and swing some of this. Got to watch those blackberries behind me there. Ooh. Now put my D-loop back into that blackberry then. Not good. Just trying to go as short as I could. Just got to be very careful with my D-loop at the back of my cast there. Just got to do a fairly shallow D. I might even step down here a little bit, that might help matters. So I'm actively fishing the retrieve here, just along that bank. Whoa. Okay. There's various eddies out there that are affecting my swing. Ah, I'm in the grass. Okay. I'll take that as a sign and move on to the next spot. It's usually much easier spay casting if you're standing in the water. It's a bit more challenging spay casting from the bank. It can be done, but it requires a lot of care with where you place your anchor and your D-loop. So I'll just have a few casts through this little slot here. It's just a bit of nice, slow walking pace water through the bottom of this pool and the tail out. I'll give it a shot. That's a cast called the cack-handed double spay that I did then. This is a downstream wind cast, the double spay. Cack-handed means I'm doing over my left shoulder, but with my right hand up. I'm going to try it again, but this time with a bit more upstream mending, a big reach mend, and try to sink it deeper. Just holding my rod nice and high here, keeping the running line off the water, because there's a few different current speeds going in there, and I want to try to keep as straight a line connection as I can to the flies. Okay, I'll walk it down now for the next cast. Okay, I'm getting bottom there. It's a single spay. It's a 45-degree downstream cast. So it's not going to sink quite as deep. It's going to have a slower swing. I'm not going to let that hang too long on the dangle because I hit bottom there before. I know it shallows up. Alright, now, the same length of line, I'll make more of a 90-degree cast with the cack-handed double spay. Give it some more sink time. And this is going to swing a little bit faster across. So I'm fishing a slightly different slot than I was before, even though I'm fishing the same length of line from the same position. It's helpful in spay fishing to try to visualise what your flies are doing at the end of the swing, because that's the portion that you're fishing, is down there in the area where the flies are swinging. You're not really fishing the sinking portion of the cast. Now it's fishing. So I'll try to make that a little bit more obvious to you guys in this cast. Okay, cast out. Big mend now. Sinking, sinking, sinking. Still sinking. I haven't come tight to the fly yet. Now, at that point there, I'm tight to the fly. Now we're fishing. Fly's swinging across. This is a bit of a faster swing this time. I'm just varying it up just to get the swing that I want. Fish a little bit more line this time. I'll do a single spay this time, a 45-degree downstream cast. Slower swing, not as deep. Okay, sinking and fishing. Oh, I just had a hit. Okay. Back up just a tiny bit. Okay, let's try that again. It was just a tiny little bump, but it was a bump. Sinking, 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 and fishing. All right, now I'm going to fish that same length of line again, and this time do the double spay and do more of an across stream presentation. Try to get a bit of a mend in there so it's not too fast on the swing. Okay, still sinking, and now fishing. Slow that swing a little bit. I've got a Skagit head on here at the moment with a sink tip, and this style of line setup is better suited to waterborne anchor casts. You can still do the touch and go casts like the single spay and the snake roll with it, what we call sort of Scandi style casts, but those touch and go casts do work better with a lighter Scandi head, and likewise these waterborne casts work better with the heavier Skagit head. So I might just have a little bit of a swing through this riffle here. Just a little bit of a soft edge there. Along it, some of that softer water might possibly hold a fish. Give it a go. Yep, there's a fish. Always a good one. Just try and get him into the softer water here. Fish. Nice brown. Oh no, he's a rainbow actually. And he's a good fish. Beautiful. Beautiful. What a lovely fish. Well. There we go, guys. How about that? What a lovely fish. Let me get this fly out. He took the woolly bugger. So he took the streamer, not the nymph. Oh, okay. I got the fly out. He just came out of the net. He is actually a brownie. Sorry. Nice take. All right. Lovely brown trout. He's probably 18 inches. I reckon he might be. Oh, I'm estimating maybe 2.5 pounds, something like that. Beautiful fish. There we go, guys. I wasn't expecting to catch anything today, but there you go. If you persist, sometimes it comes together. All right, let's release this guy. Okay. Here we go, fella. He's ready to go. Off he goes. Yes! There you go, guys. Trout Spey works. Good fun. So you can see there's a little bush just out in the middle of the flow here. And behind it is a pocket of soft water. And that's where that brown trout was sitting. He was sitting in the soft water behind that obstruction. Just out of the main flow, but able to take food as it came down. That's the spot that I was targeting. And sure enough, there he was. All right, I'm going to keep fishing this spot and see if there's any more fish in there. Well, that shows you the value of starting fishing short, guys. I only had about the tip of the line out then when I caught that fish. I probably wouldn't have cast more than 10 feet, maybe 15. So there may well be some more fish sitting in this seam. Ooh, I think I had a take then. Right as I was pulling up. Okay, sinking. Fishing that seam behind that bush at the moment. Because of where I'm holding my rod there. Could also drift it across and fish this inside seam too. So you'll see I'm trying to fish my fly right along that seam there. I'm casting more or less into it. Big upstream mend. Oh, and I'm in the bush. No. Ugh. That was too big an upstream mend that time. Alright. That might be gone. I don't really fancy waiting over there. Oh, I got it. You do fish heavier leaders with this setup, so you have got a chance of getting flies back in those situations. I'm fishing 10 pound fluorocarbon at the moment on this, which helped me with that last fish because he was downstream, obviously. I was fighting against the current, so I was able to put a little bit of hurt on him because of the weight of the leader that I'm using. Upstream mans and drift it down the slot. Same again. Upstream mans. Now you'll notice I'm doing mostly downstream casts here. That's because we've got very fast water out there to the right, and that's not water that the fish are going to be sitting in. They're going to be sitting in this slightly slower slot in here. So if I was to cast out at a higher angle into there, my fly is just going to whip through there too fast. So I'm doing a fairly shallow angle cast, doing a single spay for this, and then just letting it sink down in that pocket, in that soft little slot. Because if there's fish in here, I think that's where they're going to be sitting, where that brownie was in the soft water there. So I'm just peeling off about a foot at a time here, fishing this slot quite slowly. There's a couple of mayflies buzzing around. You see them up there? There's definitely a hatch going on. So I'm fishing right down about where that current meets the main flow there now. About, that's probably about 90 feet out, I reckon. Might do one more. Back. There's a little bit of a slot just through here. The water slows a little bit. It might deepen up. I'm going to try swinging a few through that. And once again, guys, the value of that last fish that I caught, that shows you. Fish short. Fish the water at your feet first. Any guide will tell you that. There can be fish right up on the edges. They can be right where you're standing, and if you wander in and throw the longest cast that you can right over the top of them, you've blown those opportunities. So, fish short first. Got a little more sink time this time. I've got bottom there. Okay. Step down a little bit this time. So I can just see from a couple of disturbances out there that you can see the boils on top of the water in a couple of places. That indicates that there's boulders under the surface, and those obstructions can hold fish. So I might just put 1 or 2 casts out through those bits, just in case there's a fish tucked in behind one of those. So I can see it's shallowing up down there. I don't need to give it quite as much sink time. So I'm casting at a bit of a shallower angle with a single spay, and I don't have to do as bigger reach mend on it, because it doesn't need as much sink time. Just out of interest, I might put one just further across into the middle there. See if I can fish that middle seam. Probably do a double spay here. Just a little bit of softer water out there in the middle that could possibly hold something. There's just a little bit of a slower water coming through there. I can see there's a bit of weed and stuff here. There's obviously a little bit of a drop off there, and it just slows up a little bit on that edge. I might just get up in there and swing a couple down through that to see if there's something sitting up on that edge. Once again, starting short. I can see over there on the far side there, not quite on the far side, there's a bit of a soft spot in the water. There might be a drop off there. I might see if I can get a cast over into that. I'm going across a lot of fast water here, so try to hold my line up off the water. Got an upstream wind here, so doing a snap cast. Not that there's much breeze today, it sort of keeps changing direction a little bit, but I'll do another one of those a little bit squarer. No, that was just a snag or something. That wasn't a fish. And again, there's lots of bits of weed clumps and stuff in there. Okay, time to move on. We might have time for one more spot, almost at the end now, and I need to get going, but we'll try one more. Alright, this is a funny little spot, guys. There's a big blackberry covered tree hanging out here, and as you can see there's a little bit of an eddy behind it and an edge going across there just under this willow tree. So I'm not going to be able to conventional spay cast here, but I've got plenty of room behind me, so I might just put a few short overhead casts in and fish this little edge here, just to prove the point that just because you've got a long two-handed rod doesn't mean you have to fish long all the time. You can fish short too. Okay, so I'm just going to overhead cast here. There's no way I can spay cast because of the big blackberry covered tree in front of me, but I can still fish it. I'm just swinging the fly out from that current into that edge there, just to see if there's something sitting in there, sitting on that edge waiting for food to swing past. And I'll swing it all the way down under that willow tree under there. It's the kind of spot that a big brown might like to hang in. So as you can see, you can overhead cast these lines. Don't need to do much, just don't need to faff around with false casting, just give it a haul and it'll go, because it's essentially a shooting head. Alright guys, this is definitely my last spot for the day. You can see there's a tree out off the bank here a little bit, and that's creating some nice soft water underneath it. So I'm just going to swing through this. Okay, so I'm going to start nice and short here. Just flip that in there before I even get in the water. Okay, it's actually a bit deeper this slot, so I might go a little bit more broadside and do a big mend and try and sink one a little deeper. It's a good idea to mix it up with your casts and your mends when you're out on the river. Just try different ways of fishing the same water, because the presentation at the end down on the fly is going to be different. Try a bit more sink time this time. Give it a little bit of action with the rod tip. Well, there you go, guys. That's a little bit of an introduction into what trout spey fishing is all about in Australia. By no means comprehensive, of course. There's so much to this subject that, you know, you really need to spend a bit of time on it. I haven't gone into any details on the casting today. That is a whole other huge subject on its own. So if you're going to give this style of fishing a try, I really recommend that you have to go and get a couple of casting lessons first of all from a good instructor, just to get your casts organised. This video was more about the fishing aspects of it and how to put it into practice, and I hope I've shown you guys some good tips about that. I love this style of fishing. It's a lot of fun. You cover different water than you would cover in conventional fly fishing. It's particularly suited to our big rivers, the big tailwater rivers, and that's the kind of water that's hard to fish sometimes with a single-handed rod. So if you want to get out and try some of these bigger rivers that, you know, potentially have bigger fish and higher fish populations, then it's a good way to go. It wasn't really supposed to be about catching fish today. That was just a bit of a bonus. I thought that I was really going to struggle because of the conditions and the super high water and the super fast flow. But there you go. I suppose it just goes to show that it doesn't matter what the conditions are. If you apply the principles for finding fish and you present the fly to them properly, then you can get lucky and you can catch a nice fish like I did today. So I really enjoyed the Trout Spey weekend that I just had with Peter Morse. That was fantastic. So if you guys want to give this a go, that's a really good option to learn a lot in a weekend, both about the casting and the fishing application of it. So yeah, look him up, and if you're interested, give it a go. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, give us a like, leave us a comment, any questions, let me know, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks guys, hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time.